Have you ever made a sewing pattern straight out of the packet and been disappointed with the results? In today's episode, pattern designer and fitting expert Elisalex Jewell gets us excited about the possibilities of pattern hacking and learning to fit clothes to your own body. She also talks about how having Orsola de Castro, the founder of Fashion Revolution, as a mum impacted her own relationship to fashion and sustainability. So stick around just a little bit and we'll get into it. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, awesome listener. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're having a good one. And if you're not, I hope that listening to this episode will help turn things around for you. Are you getting much time to make at the moment? I'm pretty time poor, but my Sojo and my Knits Joe are running high. So as patrons of the podcast know, I had a bit of a stash-related situation recently because we discovered some weird fungus growing in our bathroom airing cupboard, which is where all my fabric is housed, or rather was housed, because obviously I couldn't leave it in there anymore. Well, the whole debacle forced me to get really honest with what I've been hoarding, including some big bags of unwanted clothes and other textile items that I've been meaning to rescue and reuse in some way, many of which I've had for well over a decade. So I had a big sort through everything and I washed and aired the items that I did want to keep that were smelling musty. And it basically came down to this. I had to look at each item and decide if I had the time and the energy to wash and dry the piece and then try to find a new home for it somewhere in our cramped little house. There are lots of pieces that I answered yes to, but a bunch of items that were put into the charity collection bank, theoretically heading off to be recycled. So I guess that's a sustainability fail, because as we've established in previous episodes of the podcast, a large proportion of donated textiles get shipped off to the global south, sent to landfill or incinerated, and there's no guarantee that the items that I hope will be recycled will actually end up there. But on the upside, I'm now more in love with my stash/resource collection than ever. I know exactly what's in there, and I have plans for almost all of it. And I have the slight added pressure of not having enough space to store it out of sight, which means I'm really getting stuck in. So this week I've been making a pair of jeans with some denim that's been in my stash for about 6 months, so not one of the oldest pieces. But I've got heaps of projects then lined up to get into after that. So being super excited to use what I already have is my sustainability win for the week. So I want to take this opportunity to say massive thanks to Angela and Ella for signing up to support the podcast this week. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy being part of the community of dedicated Check Your Thread heads. So let's get into today's episode. So this is the second part of my conversation with Elisalex Jewell. The first part was episode 131, so 131, in which we talked about self-drafting your own patterns to achieve a great fit for your body. You don't have to have heard that episode to enjoy this conversation, but you might want to pause this and go and listen to episode 131 first if you're a completist like me. Anyway, this episode is essentially a fabulous pep talk for those of us who are a bit reluctant to make changes to a pattern, either to customise the style or to achieve a better fit. I really love how Elisalex reframes the fitting process as an exploration into your own body. And learning the fitting adjustments that will make things look and feel great means that we can accept, rather than fear, inevitable changes to our body, because we'll know what to do about it to continue to look and feel good. Remember, all bodies change over time, and this is natural and normal. And lucky us, we have the skills to embrace these changes rather than lament them. So you're going to love this one, I promise. So until next week, take care of yourself and of your loved ones. Check there's no fungus growing in or near your stash, and enjoy! So let's get into hacking a little bit. So we've been talking about it in and out of this conversation, but I do think that it is such an underrated thing, and it's something that I don't think people are doing enough. Like I made an episode about pattern hacking because I really want to encourage people to think of their sewing patterns as a starting point. I know it's a really kind of overused phrase, but I think that it is a way to really stamp your personality and your preferences onto a design. So you're creating a garment that feels you have a deeper connection with, and you're going to want to put more time and energy into it, and you're going to want to keep it for longer as well. So I do think that's a real aspect of sustainability in that as well. But I know I'm preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, yeah, 100% agree with all of that. I totally agree. And I think it might be a symptom, again, going back to what we were saying about there just being so much more on offer, because again, back in the day, we were all pattern hacking. And it was being talked about, and it was a huge thing, and it was like you'd post whatever it was that you'd made, and you'd list the pattern hacks, you'd list the modifications that you'd made, not just the like, oh, I did an FBA and like I fixed the gaping neckline. It would be like, yeah, so I did this, but then I changed the sleeve so that it's like this, and then I put the skirt from that pattern onto the bodice instead, and and it was part of what was so amazing as a pattern designer, was releasing a pattern and then seeing people hack it and being like, oh my God, I hadn't even thought that you could do that. Like that was always such a huge part of being a pattern designer and releasing patterns and seeing how people then interpreted that design. I guess we're seeing it less. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's still something that is a huge part of my sewing.
Yeah. Do you tend to hack every pattern that you approach?
Pretty much. I mean, probably 90% of the patterns that I make, I will hack them in some way, for sure. Because it's like, it's the reason I started sewing. Like if I go to a shop and I'm like, oh, I like that dress, but I'd rather it with a different sleeve or with a different skirt or in a different fabric. And that's why you then start sewing, or part of the reason why you learn how to sew, because then you have that autonomy and that creative control. So for me, it's exactly the same with a pattern. I'll see a pattern release and I'll be like, yeah, I like that. That's really cool. But I'm going to change this, that, and the other to make it more me.
Can you give me an example of any you've done yourself that have been successful?
Oh my God, I'm just trying to think. So, being pregnant, I've actually sewn so little for myself.
It's just not worth it.
It's really not. And I really thought, because also a lot of the things that I've made in the past are all quite floaty and everything. So I was like, oh, they'll fit my tummy. It's totally fine. They do not fit my boobs.
True.
Didn't see that one.
So you make all these things that kind of like have an empire line. You're like, they'll be fine. And like, no, can't get them over.
So I've mostly just been in stretchy stuff. But I mean, for example, every single pattern that we release, I then hack.
Right.
So it's not even like I'm only hacking other people's designs because my designs are so perfect for me. Yeah, no, I mean I'll make a design and I'm already thinking about how I can then hack that for myself. And like I guess an example is our Liz dress, which if you've heard the episode with the new graft house that I did, I was banging on about that. That was basically designed so that I could have the perfect bodice for myself that would just be the jumping off point for like infinite dresses. So I've made that dress so many times, but essentially the main thing is just that the bodice is the same. The dresses are all not the same at all, but the bodice, because I just nailed that bodice, for me, it fits me so well. I love it so much. And the sleeve itself is just a really basic sleeve, so I've hacked that sleeve so many times. I've done one that has like a big gathered ruffle on it. I've done bishop sleeves. I've done a flutter sleeve. I've done no sleeves, and then obviously the skirt is like infinite possibilities there as well. So even our own patterns, I actually rarely make them as they are on the packet.
Yeah.
And it does make sewing more sustainable if you can see it in that way, because if you can, if you find a pattern that you like the bare bones of, you spend the time to get it to fit you well, then you've got your perfect jumping off block for so much, for like almost anything. You can then take, like I'm thinking I've got a dress pattern in my mind, like a simple darted bodice or a simple princess seam bodice, and and once you've got that bodice to fit you well, that pattern has infinite possibility. you can see a trend coming through and you can adapt that pattern for that, you know. And I mean, I don't want to say like you don't then need to buy more patterns, because that's shooting my own business in the foot, but you don't really, you know, you don't need that many patterns. You can pretty much make whatever you want from a handful of basic patterns that you've spent the time getting to fit you well, and then hacking them, you know, like.
And it's just a case of building up your confidence as well, isn't it? Just trying something and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you make a mistake once, you won't make that mistake again. That's the best way you can learn, you know, what doesn't work. I think pattern hacking is an absolutely essential and, you know, one of the most important parts of sewing patterns for me anyway. And I would definitely encourage anyone to give it a go if they haven't, because it's the most satisfying and the most creatively freeing part of the process.
We're bringing pattern hacking back.
Yes. Let's sew like it's 2010.
So let's talk a little bit about fitting, because before you even started creating tutorials and guides for self-drafting, you've been teaching fit for a long time as well, haven't you? And I know that a lot of people find fitting garments like really quite daunting, but you've kind of really embraced it. Tell me about like how did you, you know, developing your own knowledge of it, and how would you encourage other people to kind of develop their own ability to fit things well to themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were all starting out sewing, there wasn't really any chat about fitting.
There wasn't, was there?
No, and we were making stuff that was cute, but like fit so badly. And you know, and it wasn't talked about, and obviously there wasn't any chat about size inclusivity. It was kind of like, oh, make this cute dress out of the packet and shut up if it doesn't fit you well.
Exactly, or, like, yeah, screw you if your body's not this exact proportions.
Exactly. So we quite quickly figured out. So when we were first releasing patterns, we would always do a sew along to go along with it on the blog, like many others. And it kind of became quite quickly apparent that, as well as really benefiting from the additional kind of colour photographs and like more long-winded explanations than you can get into on an instruction booklet, people were also really responsive to the fitting element of the sew-alongs that we did, and I was also just learning on the job. I had never, you know, I had very basic knowledge of fitting patterns at the time. I was only just learning how to do it for myself. You know, I think the first pattern alteration I ever made was a full bust adjustment, and I was just like completely blown away by the difference that it made. It's so
exciting, isn't it, when you're suddenly like, oh, game changer. Like, whatever your fitting thing is, like whatever you need for your body, like that's it. Never going back.
Never going back. It was amazing. The first FBA I ever did was on our Elisalex dress bodice, which was one of the first patterns that we ever released. And I just couldn't believe it. I had these two bodices, these two toiles, to like experiment with. The first one that had no alterations, that was just based on my as close as possible to my measurements that I could get on our sizing chart, and it fit fine. Like, again, I could have worn it, I could have gotten away with it, but like it was just a bit squishy on the boobs. It just wasn't, you know, it wasn't how I imagined it should be. And then I did this full bust adjustment, and I was just like, oh, sorry, what? Like, my boobs look so good. And it was that thing of like, okay, this is next level. Like now this fits comfortably. It fits my body really well, and the difference in the way that it looks was so glaringly obvious when you compared the two. And then in turn, the way that I felt when I wore it was just like, yes, I made this, and look at how hot.
And you've got the two in your wardrobe. Which one are you going to reach for? It's always going to be the one with the adjustment.
100%. So we started incorporating some basic pattern fitting options. Like these are some basic things that you might need to do to each pattern, and this is how you do it on this particular pattern. Obviously, a full bust adjustment is going to look different on a princess seam bodice than it does on a darted bodice. And people were starting to be like, "Oh my God, this has made such a difference. Thank you so much." So it was just that at the beginning. It was just like, okay, we need to make sure, because obviously we can't include all of that information in the sewing pattern itself.
Yeah.
But, we need to make sure that we're supporting all of our releases with that information as well.
But that's what I like about your company. You're always so responsive to what's going on, and you're not afraid to be like, okay, yeah, cool, let's do this now. This is what people are interested in.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, you have to be. There's obviously that moment where you're like, with certain things and you're like, oh my God, are we going to be able to do this? I don't know. And then you're like, no, let's just do it. Let's just try it out.
Start rapidly Googling full bust adjustments.
literally, like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to learn. So, and that's literally how it happened. And I learned, and in those first kind of years of just doing sew-alongs and fitting tutorials on sew-alongs, I learned so much, because obviously I don't have to make all of those alterations myself.
You get really good at your ones, don't you? But then you're like, oh no, can't help you with the flat seat adjustment.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, because I was doing them on tutorials and having to learn about it, I'm the opposite. I've become really good at fitting other people and like with all of that kind of stuff. But then like every now and then with myself, I'm a little bit like, but yeah, it was, and it was just really fun for me. It was, again, it was just like I was like learning a whole new side to the world of sewing and what we can offer as a business as well to people. And it just feels great, doesn't it? For me, I feel great when I'm learning new things and things are like making sense. And I'm like, oh, that's clicking into place now. I find that to be a really enjoyable feeling. And even though I'm not necessarily applying all of those things that I've learned to my own garments, it still feels like a great feeling. So
it's like a superpower, I swear.
Yeah, totally. And I really try and then when we started teaching classes, I really wanted to kind of convey that there is scope for passion and enthusiasm and like curiosity and fascination into fitting garments, because it's the thing that's the barrier essentially, or the gateway between a mediocre fitting garment and like an absolute banging dress that looks so good and feels amazing and makes you feel so much more empowered and confident in your own ability. So we started teaching the bodice fitting masterclass at New Craft House. Oh man, I can't remember what year it was, but it was 2017 maybe. I don't know, possibly 2017.
You're looking at me like, I don't know.
2016, 2017, somewhere around then. And it was, it was just an experiment to begin with. We were like, oh, well, people really love our fitting tutorials, so maybe they'd want to do it in person, because obviously, again, with a tutorial online, you're kind of putting the information out there and you're leaving somebody to their own devices, which some people get on really well with and they're like, great. And other people get a bit confused with, need some more support, would rather do it, rather have the guidance. Yeah, and they were great. They were amazing. I mean, the classes are like group therapy / fitting class. And, because for some people, it was like the first time that they'd ever actually sewn something that fit their body really well.
Yeah.
And even worn something that fit their body really well, because obviously the clothes in the shops aren't going to fit them well.
It's quite emotional.
It is emotional. It is, and I really do think that, like, if especially when we have times of having body image issues and things like that, like it makes all the difference. It really does. And I really like. Do you remember those 90s kind of like Trini and Susanna type shows? Where people would be like, right, so you're a triangle shape, so you can't wear this, that, and the other style. So you should always wear V-necks, or you should never wear a belt, or you had the kind of like your colours almost, but
you were told what you could and couldn't wear, and it was meant to be empowering, but it was kind of the opposite.
Yeah, totally. And what I kind of slowly started realising, the more people I fit, I was like, that's absolute crap. And actually, the only thing that looks bad is a piece of clothing that doesn't fit well. That looks bad for sure. But if you can get that garment to fit your body well, any person, I think, can wear absolutely any style, any neckline, any silhouette, whatever, and it will look fabulous as long as it fits well.
Amazing. I love this. It's like a rallying cry.
Yes.
We're bringing back pattern hacking and we're prioritising fit.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think that's the thing. And again, it goes back to your question of when should people start self-drafting? When should people start fitting? I think they should start fitting straight away. Don't make it a big deal. In the fitting course that I'm teaching at the moment, we've had 3 great classes. We've got 1 class left at the beginning of February, and one of the girls in the class, she's been sewing for like a year, not even, like less than a year, I think, so she's really, really at the beginning of her sewing journey.
Yeah.
And she's already, like, the fact that she signed up for that class, that she's showing up, for every session, she's doing so well. It just proves that you don't have to already be like a seasoned sewer to then start learning how to fit. Like, You need to be doing that from the beginning, because think about how many things that you waste in those first years that you're like...
It's the sea of garments behind us all. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and if you can be just making that a habit and making that part of your process. We all have parts of the sewing process that we don't enjoy, like I don't particularly enjoy cutting. I don't particularly enjoy finishing things at the end,
if I'm honest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want to have a look at every single one of my dresses, that lining hasn't been sewn into the inside, absolutely not,
But I like the way that you were saying it can be an expression of curiosity and an exploration, and it doesn't have to be seen as like, oh god, I've got to do my adaptions now.
Yeah, and it is, and what I say to my students is that it's an ongoing investigation, because you will never you may have things that you have to do more often than others, but you need to approach every single project, every single new pattern that you make with that same kind of like fresh-eyed curiosity. Take your measurements again, look at the sizing chart again, make that 12 from the beginning, because you might have to make different alterations, or you might have to, it's not just going to be like, oh yeah, I know that I need to make, a 1 inch FBA every time, and I have to take 1/4 of an inch gaping out of my neckline, and I have to grade out on my side seams by this much. It's going to be different for every single pattern that you work with. Everyone drafts to a slightly different block. There are obviously differences between, styles and designs and stuff. So it is this ongoing investigation. It's fresh every time. Our bodies obviously change throughout our lives dramatically. It's constant, it's ongoing. It's a constant curiosity in how clothes can fit our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Right, so you have given me permission to talk a little bit about your mum, because she's a legend, obviously, in the sewing sustainability sphere. So your mum is Orsola de Castro. So she started Fashion Revolution.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So she was a fashion designer when you were growing up, and that exposed you to a whole world of fashion and design, and also from the sustainability aspect as well. I didn't realise that came in so early in her involvement in that as well. So what kind of influence did that all have in the way that you started out with both your shoe business and then going forward with By Hand London?
Yeah, she was doing the sustainability thing from day one, from when she first started her fashion label From Somewhere. And basically everything that she did was made using offcuts, so scraps of fabric. And she would go and visit the kind of big factories, and she would literally sweep up the factory floors and rummage through their bins. And at first they were kind of like, what the hell are you doing?
I was going to say, because people might be doing that more now, but in the 90s were people doing that? Not really, were they?
No. I think she was definitely up there with the first people doing that, and I think, you know, and obviously she ended up developing really good relationships with certain places and factories, and you know, after a couple of seasons, they were like, oh, okay, I get what you're doing now.
I'll save it for you rather than you having to go through
exactly.
the bin.
Yeah, they would save her. Exactly, they would save her stuff, and you know, and I think for her it was an amazing part of her creative process because she never really knew what she was going to get. You know, it wasn't as simple as like, oh, I'm going to the fabric fair and I'm going to choose out the fabrics that I'm going to use in my next collection. It was like, who knows what I'm going to get? Who knows how big the pieces are going to be? Who knows how much of them I'm going to get? So, you know, and I remember exhibiting the collections with her at the shows and having to explain to the buyers, like, we work in colorways, you know, so you can order this dress, you know, you can order as many pieces as you want, but they won't be exactly the same as this dress. Like, you won't have that particular fabric in that particular spot for all of the dresses. You know, we'll work to like, oh, this is the kind of yellow orange colorway and this is the kind of blue colorway. And they were just like, what? They were completely baffled. Some people really didn't get on with it. Yeah, exactly. Other people were like, oh, so you mean every piece is unique? And we're like, yes. And they're like, wicked, that's so cool.
Right, so some were embracing that and then seeing that as a kind of selling point rather than like, I don't know how to work with this.
Totally, exactly. So that, which was amazing to see, like the kinds of people and the kinds of boutiques that saw, like you said, saw that as a selling point and saw that as like a bonus and something that made the collections more special, and the pieces themselves, because they were ultimately completely unique. So she was doing that since then. Obviously, through her kind of involvement in that and delving more deeply into the traditional running of the fashion industry, she obviously came across some really gross truths and facts about how, you know, the fashion industry operates and things like that. And it's one of those things, it's like, once you know all of that kind of stuff and you've seen it, there's no unknowing it. There's no like, oh, hey, let's go to Primark. You know, you can't do that.
That can't happen now.
No, exactly. So I grew up with that, and that obviously in some ways was kind of annoying because it meant that, well, then all my friends were like, you know, buying all their cute little things from Primark and H&M and stuff, and I was just like, oh, I can't do that. But then also, what am I going to do? I'm not going to, like, I can't afford the, you know, the like chic sustainable, there weren't even that many chic sustainable brands at the time. So I guess that was then a huge influence in.
So what did you do? Was that when you started saying yourself?
Made my own stuff, yeah, exactly. So what else can I do if I can't, you know, if I can't go and like stock up from Primark, then how am I going to clothe myself? You know, obviously I can't buy designer or anything like that. So it was a lot of making stuff for myself and secondhand shops, charity shops, eBay. Oh my God, still, you know, is still one of my biggest pleasures and has been since I was a teenager. So it's, you know, it's obviously had a huge impact on myself as a consumer. It had, it was when I set about starting my shoe business. It was a non-negotiable. There was no way I could, you know, start a shoe business in a kind of traditional way, you know, like buying new stuff and wasting loads of crap and having it all made in intensely questionable factories, you know, where it was cheaper. There was just no way that was going to be an option for me. And it was always a barrier in that it made my product incredibly expensive from the very beginning. And I was always striving to kind of make my business and make the shoes even more sustainable, you know, as time would go by. Obviously, I know that none of us can kind of get it perfect. So actually, kind of quitting the fashion industry felt like a bit of a relief, because it kind of meant that I didn't really even have to think about it anymore, and I could just crack on with my own making, and that already to me felt way more sustainable. You know, I could. Obviously, then you start thinking about the fabrics and when they come from, and then you're like, oh my God. It's applicable to every aspect of my life, But at least with that, I would buy fabrics from like charity shops and duvet covers and stuff from eBay and things like that. Obviously, I bought new fabrics as well, but at least in my head, it was like, well, I'm not going to waste as much, and I'm sewing it myself. I know what goes into it. It's been all I've ever really known, I suppose.
That's so interesting, because for most of us, we've come to these realizations because we've seen documentaries, because we've read things probably written by your mum, whereas like you had that from the beginning. So that's really, really interesting that, we've kind of learned and gone, all those times I went to Primark, and you skip that.
Kind of, yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely had my moments before she kind of started figuring it out and like teaching us and everything. But yeah, it's basically been like having all those documentaries and all those books, but like in-house from my mum kind of thing, like over the dinner table.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you so much. This has been so interesting, and it's gone on for way longer than we planned. So thank you so much for the additional time and energy. I know that you have not probably that much of either at the moment, so I'm extra, extra grateful. So where can people find you?
So people can find me on Instagram. By Hand London is at By Hand London on Instagram, and obviously there's our website as well, byhandlondon.com, where you can find all our patterns and you can find the book and you can find all of our other kind of educational resources. We've got like fitting, webinar recordings and all sorts of tutorials on the blog as well. And then I'm also on my personal Instagram, which is at Elisalex. I'm pretty patchy as well, patchy posting, so and yeah, probably will be more patchy over the coming months as I
expect patchiness incoming.
Yeah, exactly, patchiness and like baby's feet and stuff.
Good. I don't want anything other than patchiness from you. You've got too much going on.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, and that's us.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And I'm just amazed by how much you have got going on, and I wish you all the very, very best with it. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!